All right, today was the calm before the storm because tomorrow is the highlight of the week. Of course, we've got Nvidia in the afternoon. We've got Fed minutes as well. Neither of these things should be particularly threatening. Nvidia is an absolute beast and showing unprecedented growth, but there's a little bit of peaking in that growth from the last quarter. Minutes are going to follow up on a ton of Fed speak already that's been quite generous and willing to wait before having to tighten policy and generally looking to loosen policy. So both events look like they should be bullish catalysts. That being said, both have some nuances to them. Firstly, thinking about chips because that's where the main focus is going to be. Nvidia is so important. When you look at the market trying to break back out, it's clear that we need to have our leader back out in front. Yes, we've gotten the highs, but Nvidia hasn't yet. And so the third attempt leading to a breakout would be a pretty big deal. And that's what you want. You don't want a rejection again. That would be a little bit discomforting. You want to break out tomorrow on the numbers. Now that we know the growth is going to peak out a little bit, we're going to be thinking about margins. We're going to be thinking about profitability. And I think this gets really interesting because we might start to see some real separation of the wheat from chaff and chips. So far, it's basically been all linked together, a sort of macro move within a micro story on a stock and sector specific theme of artificial intelligence. Supermicro has been, of course, the biggest winner. We've seen a little bit of drift off the highs from there, so you've already seen some of the air come out of the most extreme trades. Nvidia with now a third attempt at the same level. When you move further down the spectrum, the numbers do drop off pretty quickly, even though the performance doesn't so much. Nvidia up 90% in the last 6 months. Supermicro way out here in front. Coherent, TSM, Micron, Qualcomm, some of the big winners that have been drifting in the same category as well. But once you move basically past like TSM, even Coherent too on a trailing basis doesn't have wonderful numbers. But the figures do start to break down a little bit. In fact, if you think about the laggards in the space, AMD arguably one of them, and I think one of the most extreme ones because when we look at the trailing versus forward, there's a massive difference. The market is basically expecting such an explosion of growth outside of Nvidia that many of these other semiconductors have been trading at wildly more aggressive valuations. For example, the price to earnings relative to growth for Nvidia is just 1, which is a fantastic trade-off generally. But a lot of those PEG ratios start to go up as you move down the spectrum of chips. In terms of absolute growth, it's basically impossible to match Nvidia or Supermicro, but the market's gotten aggressive in that it's actually been rewarding companies that so far haven't shown any growth. So Nvidia has to keep going here. Nvidia's got to move forward, not just technically because it needs to punch through what has been now resistance at the old high, but also because the narrative breaks down so quickly when you get away from the top 3 performers in the sector right now that if Nvidia disappoints, the bar for disappointment will move much lower throughout the rest of the group. Now, the odds that they disappoint, I think, are still pretty low. And even though it looks like we've got everything going for us, the macro and the micro with the semiconductor trade, tomorrow's going to be an important refresh on both those topics, so stay alert.